Let's talk a little bit more about the U.S. strategy, because we continue to see this maximum pressure strategy coming from the Trump administration when it's really different from a strategy that perhaps they've used on North Korea. Again, maximum pressure, but this going at it more internationally with an international coalition. When it comes to Iran, it's been a bit more unilateral. So how effective has this administration been in forcing allies to go along for the ride?
Well, I think there's actually a strong parallel between the North Korea and the Iran strategies in the sense that the strategies are both ultimately contradictory. And in both cases, the president desires to exert significant pressure on a rogue regime to bend it to his will. But in both cases, he doesn't actually want to get into a military fight that might be necessary to achieve the ends that he's laid out, whether that's denuclearization in the North Korean case or a wholesale reorientation of Iranian foreign policy and perhaps regime change in the Iranian case. And so I think what you're seeing is that these two contradictory elements of American strategy are becoming harder for the president to reconcile and to balance as time goes on. Because as the pressure on Iran intensifies, Iran's tendency to escalate becomes more pronounced, and that creates situations like the one we had a couple of weeks ago where an American drone was shot down and the president appeared to be on the verge of military action.
And yet, how much has the Iran crisis showed the world the power of the U.S.?
Well, I think what it's revealed is that American power is actually more significant even than many observers appreciated. And so what the United States has done in the Iranian case is not simply apply its own economic sanctions to Iran. It's essentially forced most of the rest of the world to go along with those sanctions. And so European governments may still be parties to the JCPOA. They may oppose the reimposition of American economic sanctions, but German firms and French firms and British firms and other European firms really don't have a whole lot of choice but to go along with the American sanctions, because if they violate them, they will lose access to the American market in order to maintain access to the Iranian market. And that's really not much of a choice at all for most major European concerns.
Yeah, in terms of non-choices, President Trump has also invited the Iranian regime to talks without any preconditions, but that's not an appealing one for Iran, is it?
I think the Iranians probably feel at this point they would need some sort of American concession or some sort of European concession, perhaps, prior to entering into any negotiations, because the image that's been portrayed certainly is that the United States has been applying pressure. It's essentially been beating up on Iran. And so just politically speaking, it would be very difficult for the Iranian leadership to go into a negotiation on its back foot in that sense, unless it received some sort of even symbolic concession beforehand.